Peter. So, hi guys, a very warm welcome to our first session as part of May Wine Month 2025. Now, today's session is very much an introduction to the month, probably less likely to take the full half an hour depending on questions and feedback, but it's really to set the scene for this themed month, talk you through who's going to be presenting throughout the month, but also cover a little bit of a basic understanding and introduction to how sustainability can impact the wine industry, i.e., viticulture and vinification. So, yeah, firstly, some of you will have already seen the introduction video that we shared this morning via email and via Forth. These slides will be available straight after this call, and there is a link in the slide to the video, or you can scan the QR code to watch the same video on YouTube. That just gives you a 1 minute overview to the theme of the month and sets the scene of what May Wine Month 2025 is all going to be about. But I wanted to just walk you through it. So, key part of when we sent out the brief to the importers around this year is all about making sure that they put forward wine producers, wine brands which already had sustainability embedded within their culture, embedded within their practices, and embedded within their brand. So the selected producers, some of which we've heard from on previous years, but some of which will be new presentations for us, are wine producers from around the globe, where sustainability is already a key part of their business. So we start tomorrow, Friday the 2nd, with a session from Crowded House. Crowded House are a producer in the South Island of New Zealand, the north of the South Island of New Zealand, which make our By the Glass Sauvignon. And all these sessions, apart from one that I'll point out, is at 4 o'clock. Then our second session, which is next Tuesday, the 6th of May, is with the Symingtons family. So the Symingtons make a number of our wines. They make all of our ports, our Graham's Ports, which is our port partner for Hotel de Van, but they also make a range of still wines and have a real pioneering climate change and sustainability influenced winery in the south of Portugal, sort of halfway between Port and Faro, so just outside Lisbon. So Anthony will be talking very much about the work that they're doing there. Then we move into Rioja to hear all about our By the Bottle Rioja producer and what they're doing in their part of the world around sustainability and climate change. And then we go to France, our By the Glass Merlot producer, who we're collaborating with later on this year in October to do an international Merlot day with, and they'll be talking about what they're doing. And then we move to Planeta in Sicily. So Planeta make our Nero d'Avola, which is our by the glass Italian wine on the core Hotel Van List. They also make a number of wines which we feature on the Avon Gorge, sorry, on the Wimbledon menu as well, the Italian themed menu at Wimbledon. After Planeta on the 14th, we'll be back into Italy to learn more about what we're doing, what our producer of the Asti is doing around climate change. And then the end of that week will be quite an important one, which is Torres. So Torres, I'm going to be talking a little bit about later near the end of today's session. But Torres is very much a producer that have led a lot of climate change projects and are seen internationally as one of the kind of flagship wineries around sustainability and climate change adaptation. So we have a session with them on the 16th, on Friday the 16th of May. Starting week commencing the 19th of May, Monday the 19th, we're back in Australia with Seyfried. So Seyfried are a relatively new producer. We brought them on about a year ago, and they make our By the Glass Pinot Noir across Hotel de Van Court. And then that week, we're back into France, our By the Bottle Poulet Fumé, Maison Blanquette, Blanquette, sorry, who make, like I said, By the Glass Pinot Poulet Fumé, and they'll be talking to us about what they're doing from a climate change perspective. And then our By the Glass Bordeaux Superior is Chateau Pen, and these guys will be talking about what they're doing. And then the very last week, so this is the one and only session that is not at 3 o'clock throughout the month. Kendall Jackson, the Jackson Family Wines will be, their session is at 4 o'clock UK time, and that's on Tuesday, the 27th of May. And then the last two sessions of that week are Henna's. Obviously, there's a lot that you will know. Sorry, the Royal Tokai, who, as a lot of you will know, we worked with in the winter time of this year to produce some content around Meet the Makers for Tokai, and we list their late harvest wine as a by the glass wine across Hotel de Man. And then the very last session of the month on the 30th of May is with Henner's, English sparkling wine producer. And again, they have a big sustainability message and culture throughout their business. So the planner you will have seen and has been shared a number of times to the hotels looks like this, and this consolidates all those sessions throughout the month. But before, I suppose, really to give a little bit of background knowledge and a bit of background understanding to everyone on this call, either watching the call live or via watching the recording, is just to give a little bit of understanding around the sort of the wine industry when it comes to sustainability and climate change adaptation. So firstly, two words on this screen, viticulture and vinification. I'm sure everyone on this call knows this already, but just to clarify, viticulture, viti, grape, culture, farming. So viticulture is the farming side of the wine industry. So it's growing the grapes from literally planting a vine through to the harvesting of a bunch of grapes at the end of the harvest. Vinification, vini, wine, cation, making. Vinification is the making the wine. So the journey of wine from planting a vine to selling a bottle of wine from the winery or in a restaurant really goes through two key areas, viticulture and vinification. And we're going to look at these two things slightly separately around how they can impact the environment and therefore what sustainability actions each of those two areas of the wine industry should be looking at. So firstly, viticulture. Key aspects of viticulture and sustainable viticulture is I've broken down into a number of points here. So firstly, it's around the health of the soil. And that could be anything from the use of fertilizers through to the use of cover cropping, which it mentions here. And cover cropping is where we plant or sow or allow naturally other plants to grow in between the vines. That increases the biodiversity, which we'll come on to later, but it also increases the health of the soil and reduces the need for fertilizers and other sprays and man-made materials, phosphates that can damage the ecosystem of the land. Water conservation. So there's a number of ways that we can improve water conservation in viticulture. Firstly, it's about plot selection. So deciding the wine makers deciding on where they're going to grow certain varieties, growing varieties that need less water in drier areas of their wineries, their vineyards, or drier plots within the vineyards areas that they own within their respective countries. There's also a lot of work that is done around the health of the soil, the first point, and reducing the need for ploughing, reducing the need for going up and down the rows in between the vines with tractors, that keeping the soil health, which will help the water conservation because the actual soil will retain more water and you need to irrigate less. Something Torres do, which we'll touch on later, is they have a big project to look at newer wine varieties, which are older varieties that have maybe fade out of commercial production, but bringing them back into commercial production because they are better at dealing with the adaptations to climate change that country is seeing. So drier farming lands require new varieties or old varieties regenerated that can deal with less moisture in the land. Pest disease management. So probably there's an underlying message that goes through all these points, which is about biodiversity. And by improving the biodiversity or supporting the growth of biodiversity in the vineyard will help to reduce the need for phosphates, the need for pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers. And the pest and disease management is very much around getting the biodiversity of the vineyard into a natural state of control. So using natural pests, as it says here, those pests could be anything from ladybirds, bees, through to chickens in a producer in China. They use herds of sorry, not China, Chile. They use herds of chickens to eat certain insects that damage the vines. So there's a whole load of ways that innovative ways that different wine producers can use various pests to prevent diseases which impact the grapes on the vine. Ultimately, it's a way of trying to minimize the use of synthetic pesticides and herbicides like chemical sprays. I've said this already a few times, but it very much connects the dots above. The biodiversity of the vineyard is a key focus around trying to create a more sustainable and healthier vineyard that is also in its best possible state to cope with the pressures around climate change. So creating habit and managing the vineyard to support local ecosystems. And then carbon footprint. So some basics here, reducing the need to drive their tractors down the roads, reduces the fuel combustion of the tractors, which reduces the overall carbon emissions of that vineyard. It's looking at tractors that run on electricity rather than fossil fuels. It's looking at a number of different ways to reduce the machinery involvement of a vineyard and where machineries are involved or required to make sure they're as sustainable as possible. There are tractors in certain parts of the New World which run completely on solar power panels, and they harvest the grapevines with solar powered grape harvesters, etc. So that's the viticulture. From a vinification perspective, it's more around ways that we can reduce waste and reduce the carbon footprint from point of production of wine through to distribution at the end. So I'm just bringing these points up here. The first one is really around waste management, which is the same in any businesses, to reduce the need to reduce the demand on landfill sites, to increase the amount of recycling within the vineyard. So it's simple things like looking at the reduction of packaging, the reduction of using of papers, cardboards, etc. in the winery. The second one is there's a number of wineries that will look at within their winery itself how they can be as energy efficient as possible. So that is some of the obvious stuff like solar panels for energy, wind turbines for energy, utilization of water to produce energy, but also for cooling. But then there's some slightly more innovative ways like digging down into certain rock crevices. So, for example, there's a winery in Uruguay called Garzon, which is all built deep into the rock because that allows natural cooling of the winery, and they use the rock faces to act as basically an air conditioning system to keep the winery cool. Water management is absolutely key. As lakes dry up, reservoirs become more difficult and or more expensive to fill. The need to protect and preserve water across both vineyard management, but also wineries is key. So there's every winemaker out there, every producer is looking at ways to minimize the amount of water they need as a producer and to maximize the recycling of water within that winery or vineyard. The last one is probably the most important on these two slides, and that is the packaging of the final product. The greatest amount of CO2 emitted from the wine industry is the production of the glass bottles that wine sits in, and the distribution of those filled bottles of wine from the winery to the final consumer. So those two things alone are the biggest negative impactors on the environment when it comes to the wine industry. And there are a number of things, I'm sure across this themed month, you're going to hear different wine producers talking about this and referring to this, trying to reduce the weight of glass bottles, which reduces the carbon impact of making the bottle, number one, and secondly, reduces the weight of the end product, therefore reduces the cost of shipping. and the impact of the shipping are absolutely key. But also looking at different ways to sell different vessels to sell wine. So, as I'm sure you're well aware, many vineyards, wineries are now looking at ways to can wines. And I think what we'll see over the next 10, 15 years is a lot of wineries move wine to cans where it's possible. You've got the benefit of canning being a pretty sterile environment, so you haven't got the risk of the wine being faulty. But what you don't have is the micro oxidation from a bottling and natural cork. So there are certain wines that will lead and fit better with being canned than other wines. And some wines, from a price point or a prestigious perspective, will probably always retain in glass bottles, but those wines will continue to grow in cost as a result of that climate impacting final packaging. So yeah, so just to summarize there's a number of things in the winery that have a big impact on the environment, but the biggest is the packaging, the production of glass, and then the weight and distribution of the finished glass bottles of wine to its final market. Just to touch on this, and I don't know whether some of the New World producers may touch on this throughout the month, but a number of wineries will distribute their wine in sort of, they call them bladders, but they're large sort of plastic pouches, which is kind of pallet size. So it's like a mini tank. And those wines are distributed to their final market, so to the UK or to, Italy or wherever they're going, and then they're bottled closer to source, closer to consumption. So rather than bottling thousands of bottles of wine in New Zealand or in South Africa or in the South American countries and then shipping that expensive and heavy glass bottle of wine, they will preserve the wine in large pouches, ship it to the UK or ship it to France or Italy, closer to the market, the European market, and it'd be bottled there, which obviously reduces the cost, but also reduces the impact on the environment in terms of shipping a much lighter total weight of product to its destination. A couple of other things that really do impact sustainability in the wineries is social responsibility, and the last one which we'll come on to is awards recognition and biodynamics and organics. So the first one here is really around the people. We were recently in a winery, and a big focus for them was around people, around engaging the local people of that community, getting the younger generation into the industry. And obviously, as a lot of you will appreciate, certain times of the year, especially harvest, the wine industry needs a huge amount of labor. A huge amount of labor to pick the grapes and to manage the winery with the grapes coming into the wineries. So at those times, it's around supporting, engaging the local communities, but also giving back at other times of the year. So lots of wineries will have community-led projects where they are, sponsoring, funding, education programs, schooling, sometimes helping with the repair of roads locally. So lots of local sustainability and community-based initiatives. And what that supports them in return is a utilization of the local labor when it comes to these key points of the year where labor is really in demand in the wine industry. But like I said, we've been talking to wineries over the last year or so, and a lot of them have got loads of initiatives and projects around engaging the local community and getting people, from that live within the towns and villages where the wineries are based, getting them back into the winemaking industry as a desired occupation, rather than moving to a big city in their country and going into a more sedentary working environment. So there's lots of projects that different areas of the winemaking world are doing to increase their local workforce and their local labour. And the last one here, before I move on, is really around certification. So there are lots and lots of different certifications, different labels when it comes to sustainability credentials, sustainability audits, and independent reviews and certifications. And there are also a number around organic and biodynamic certifications. So what we've got to be careful is now all these recognized certifications, all these badges, all these key awards, tributes within the wineries have value, but they all have a different criteria as well. So when we talk about an organic certified wine from one country, it may not mean the same thing as an organic certified wine from a different country, because the organic laws, regulations, and restrictions of country A will be often quite different to country B. And sometimes that's due to where that country is located. So certain wetter, more humid countries are allowed to use different levels of pest control than maybe a country that's in a dry, hot location where you don't have the same risks and challenges that you have in somewhere that's wet. Same for organics. In some countries, irrigation is not part of the organic certification. You can't irrigate your vines and then be classed as organic. And in other parts where it's much hotter and drier, there is a limited amount of irrigation that's permitted to keep those vines healthy. So I think the key here is that firstly, recognizing vineyards and wineries when it comes to sustainability certifications is really important. But we've got to understand that the details behind a lot of these certifications are different, depending on the country that stipulates and manages and audits those certifications. And then the same thing when we class a wine as organic and biodynamic, the certifications are different depending on the countries. Just to clarify, organic is the principles of organic around minimal intervention, reducing man-made materials on the vine, so a reduction or no use of herbicides, pesticides, insecticides, and allowing the vine to be as natural as possible. So a lot of organic producers will use wild yeasts versus cultured yeasts, etc. Biodynamic is a very different level of approach when it comes to viticulture and vinification, and that's very much it's kind of organic, but with the additional layer of complexity around the lunar cycle. And true biodynamic producers very much will only do certain things at certain times of the month around the lunar cycle. So biodynamic is probably a slightly more intense farming approach and winery approach than organics typically can be. Now, I didn't obviously in a very short amount of time, I wanted to give everyone a summary, a whistle-stop tour of sustainability approach in viticulture vinification. But what I did do is add on a link here to a article from Decanter, which is well worth a read and gives a really good holistic approach to the subject that we're talking about today. And it really helps set the scene for what you're going to be learning about through May Wine Month. But what was interesting is, and it was completely coincidental, but that article from Decanter also, there's a little extract here. It references and highlights Torres as a pioneer in climate change adaptation and sustainability. So it did really support and reinforce the fact that the wine producer that we partnered with from an incentive perspective this month actually, is recognised as wise as Decanter, as being a hero in the sustainability wine world. Also mentions Kendall Jackson there, which is another one of the producers that we're going to be hearing from during the month. So just as a reminder, that nicely hands on to the fact that the May Wine Month incentive is the last month of the quarter incentive, March through to the end of May, around Torres wines. So I will send an update on of the second month's progress, but the winners of this competition really are in for a treat and get to go and spend a couple of days in Torres in Spain, learning all about what they are doing to be sustainable, but also to focus on climate change adaptation. I am pretty much bang on time there, so it's 3:29. Wanted to allow a little bit of time for any questions, or if there's anything I've not covered that people would like me to cover. I'll just stop sharing the call there. Is there any questions that maybe you thought I would cover there, but that I haven't? From my perspective, it was really, I just really wanted to give people an overview of what this month's all going to be about, a chance to kind of understand a little bit of the background behind sustainability in viticulture and vinification. And that gives us a little bit more information as we go into the sessions throughout this themed month. So if there aren't any questions, I will end the call there. I just want to say thank you so much indeed for taking the time to join us. And also, I really hope that you join us for some or many of the educational sessions as we go through May Wine Month 2025. And obviously, as always, the calls throughout this themed month, the 13 sessions with the producers will be recorded and uploaded to the Malmaison Hotel Van Wine Academy YouTube channel for you to watch at your leisure. So thank you very much. I see the entire Tunbridge Wells there almost falling asleep. But thank you guys. Hope that session was useful, and I look forward to seeing you on many of the sessions as we go through May Wine Month 2025. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.